On this episode, we talk not only on the field, but also the operation side of the NFL. Welcome to another episode of Inside the League. Today, I have a special guest that's going to talk all about the operation side of the NFL, James Thornton. Thank you so much for being on the podcast with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So tell the audience kind of how you came to be in your current position and a little bit about your backstory.
Okay, so I'm James Thornton. Many friends and family members call me JT for short. Georgia native, grew up, born in LaGrange, Georgia, and ended up going to school in Morris Brown College, in which I played football on scholarship while studying business. At the end of my college years, I had an opportunity to go to the NFL. The first opportunity I had was with the Chicago Bears. Eventually, I went to the Atlanta Falcons, and I finished up in Cleveland. Shortly thereafter, kind of stayed in the sports realm as a trainer and started working with some teammates of mine, former teammates, and some other younger guys. But eventually, was working my way back towards NFL and the operation side. Um, the football side was great, but it's a business, and there's an entire side of that. So that's really kind of the area that I'm focused in now. Obviously, made some connections during my playing days, and you know, you make friends and network with different individuals who are doing certain things in football, and that's kind of how I kind of got back started with the NFL. Just people who I've crossed paths with from time to time. Made the introduction, and some opportunities came about. So now I work in NFL operations as a compliance officer on game days. Yeah, and it's fun. It's an entire space that a lot of people are needed to kind of make happen and make the wheels go around with the football business.
So you touched on a lot of topics that I want to get into because I think the information that you've been able to see and experience just in your track often is not on the front line, so people aren't aware. What was your track going from college to the NFL? Was it traditional? Was it a little bit different where you had to kind of go through the process differently from your other teammates? Talk about how you actually transitioned into the NFL.
Well, I'm an HBCU grad, so obviously that created some challenges in terms of exposure. There are guys that I played with that played at Power Five schools like a University of Michigan, a UC, or USC, or Alabama. All those power schools, they get a lot of exposure to their players. HBCUs, we tend to take a different route. Talent wise, you don't really see much difference in terms of my position, a cornerback, defensive back. But the offensive lineman is where they really start kind of distinguishing who's extremely talented, but a lot of that the attribute has to do with size. That being said, the exposure and the spotlight hasn't been on HBCU. So for my pathway, I had to really kind of try to stand out at every opportunity I could because I didn't have the exposure of having a nationally televised game or, commentators speaking about, my potential or my upside on a day-to-day basis as some of my counterparts. So anytime there was an opportunity for me to show up, be it an all-star game or a combine, I actually had an invite at a combine, a regional combine at Georgia Tech, um, a school locally. Let's say I went to school at Morris Brown, which is right downtown area. They allowed me to perform at that pro day, and I really shined. And I just seized that moment. I knew there was opportunity for me to get in front of the scouts and show what I could do in terms of just athletic prowess and ability. So took full advantage of that and began and started my process in terms of interviewing and preparing myself for potentially being drafted in the National Football League. Again, there's many challenges just because you're kind of looked at as a player that played against inferior talent. not necessarily the top talent in the nation. So anytime you get an opportunity to try to pair yourself or match with some of their talent, you want to take that, but you're not oftentimes given those type of opportunities. So that's something that I am really kind of focused on trying to shed more light on and create more spaces, much like yourself with what you're doing with creating this space to kind of expose individuals who can potentially enter into this world of sports on many sides. Because again, it's not just about the players and what happens on the field. Behind the scenes, it's an entire business, an entire network of individuals working really hard to make sure that the game continues to grow and that everybody gets to enjoy it.
What was that interview process like for you? Because since you had to actually put yourself in a spot of awareness by going to the combines and the camps and things like that, did the teams reach out to you? Did you have to go up to people at the combine and introduce yourself? How did that process work for you?
Yeah, as a player, only thing you really can focus on as a young guy, if you're trying to go the athletic route, you just have to let your play do the speaking for you. You have no control over where you're ranked or how people view you. But if your stats are solid, if you're working really hard, I was told that if you're good enough, they'll find you. So you just have to continue to try to work at those things. And obviously, there are certain things that will stand out. Skill position guys tend to stand out a lot because we have speed. We have a lot of athletic ability. In terms of linemen and bigger guys, the size attributes, that definitely matters. But the more athletic you are and the ability to be coachable, being a guy with a good character, that helps you out. But no, they found me. I began to get a lot of traction in my junior year, and they were like, "Okay, are you a offensive player or a defensive player?" Because in college they allowed me to do both, which helped me flourish and kind of put my name out there. And I knew that offense would give me looks, so I very intently wanted to stay on offense. But there came a time and point to where the scout says, "We're evaluating you as a player, but we need to know what are you." And I knew ultimately that I would be landing on the defensive side. That's kind of where my heart was. So I really kind of focused and dialed in on that on my senior year. Scouts would come, they would kind of evaluate tape. They'd go talk to everybody on campus and try to find out about what type of guy I was in terms of who I represented, because ultimately these are the type of investments that they have to protect, because you now will be representing them as a whole. So, I got flown into a couple of places to where, they're asking you all these questions. And one big lesson, and I think I'll share this one really quickly, that I share with everyone that I didn't have at the time. Um, they're asking me. I remember sitting down with the former GM of the Chicago Bears, Jerry Angelo, and he asked me. He says, "Why should we draft you? Like, what makes you, the guy for the job?" And I'm going through this laundry list of, man, I'm fast, I'm strong, I'm this, I'm that. And then he just kind of sat there like, "Okay, yeah, we know that. We've evaluated your talent." He was like, "So what do you need to work on?" And I had no practice, no prep. So I said, "I think I'm really polished. I think I'm ready to go right now." But I'm selling myself. I'm just trying to sell myself. But that's not actually what he wanted to hear. What he wanted to hear, and I had these conversations with NFL personnel later, is that they want to hear you grow. Yeah, I'm good at this. Yes, I'm really good. These are my strengths. But the things I can be better at should be also a laundry list. Even the things you're good at, you should still be refining those things and working on your craft and constantly be sharpening your tools. So that's really what he wanted to hear. And obviously I got that lesson on the back end, but I make sure I share that with individuals now. Anytime someone's, asking you, what can you work on? You should be telling them everything. It's not about making yourself. And I thought it would make me look bad, honestly. And that's why I was really trying to sell myself. I didn't feel confident for whatever reason saying that, well, I have to see things in person to get it. I'm not really a book type of get it right away. I'm a hands-on type of guy. I thought that would make me seem bad, but it actually shows that you have a thirst for knowledge, that you're willing to put in work and things like that. And it says, all right, if I get with this sort of staff, we have the people and the best nutritionists, we have the best trainers and the
Right.
best coaches. We can build you and mold you, but we want to know that you have the capability to be coachable and to kind of accept that. So that was a really, really good lesson that I learned through that interview process.
And looking at it like a business, I always say being an athlete, you are a business. So if you were to go on a job interview, what you're looking for is not necessarily to talk about all the things you are bad at that pertain to the position because you want the position, but the things that you have studied and done homework on that you know that organization can bring to the table. It shows that
Sure.
organization that you're paying attention to them. You've done some homework
Yeah.
about them, that you want to be invested in them. So that's a really great tip to point out, to not go in with just how I'm great, but going with a thoughtful answer about how you can improve that aligns with the skill set that the organization has that you want to be in. So you played on 3 teams and you talked about knowing that it was a business. Talk about some of the business side of things that you maybe weren't privy to or didn't fully know before you actually, jumped into the pool.
Yeah, so when I got there, it was definitely eye-opening. As a player, I've always enjoyed the game. Um, I'm a competitive guy by nature. I actually was competing out of town this week and some other things that I like to do. But one thing that kind of stood out to me was just all the gentlemen around the football field. Everybody is in khaki pants and polos. They stood out to me. And they all had clipboards and was taking notes and constantly evaluating what we were doing. The windows were clear. That way, everybody's office could see down on the field and kind of see what we're doing. Everything's videotaped. They always say the big eye in the sky don't lie. So if you're loafing or doing anything that you shouldn't be doing as it relates to producing a high quality product at practice, it's being caught. So that was definitely something that stood out to me in terms of how they followed very strict routines and schedules. In college or even individuals who might have played in high school, you'd run a couple plays, and if you mess it up, it's like, all right, we got to run this over. Next thing you know, you're running over schedule, and parents are waiting to pick up their kids like an hour later. Or in college, practice got held. The pros are not like that. Everything is on schedule. If we have a 10-minute cap for install period, when the clocks hit zero, and there are clocks all around the field and in different areas, we move to the next one. If you mess that up, then we're going to work on it in the classroom or make sure that we don't mess it up that next day. Uh, that was things that stood out to me. And then just the individuals who were involved with the game, walking around, serving as both mentors, but also individuals who maybe were former players kind of coming back, observing the game. They were young in their careers in terms of trying to figure out how to look at the game differently. I've always kind of been drawn to that. I was intrigued by those individuals in the khaki pants and polos because I understood, like, okay, this is the business side. How did this guy, I wondered, how did they get to that space? And then as I continued to move from team to team, excuse me, I would be in certain circles where I would see those certain guys. And I ultimately knew that I wanted to kind of move towards a role like that as well.
So how did you
Excuse me.
work your way into NFL operations while you were being an athlete? How did you put those pieces together?
Well, honestly, again, it's about relationships. You have to build relationships. You have to kind of pay attention to things. Uh, I, I I am definitely one who believe in wherever you are in life, whether that's a student, whether that's a current employer somewhere, you have to look at where you are, but also kind of see some other things in mind of where you want to go, and you reverse engineer it because you look at individuals who are doing it and you try to figure out what are they doing and how do they get there. Do your research. I mean, this day and age, there's no excuse. You could get online and find all types of information about individuals and their job and maybe their background and the routes they've taken. Back, when I was kind of coming up, we didn't have all those sort of things, but you could still be creative. The information is out there, so you just have to do your homework and really think about strategically, how can I get on that trajectory? And a lot of times it's simply opening your mouth, going to have a conversation with someone, picking their brain. Um, the worst someone could tell you is, no, I'm not going to tell you that.
Right.
But more than likely, they probably will share some things with you that you can take with you both career wise and personal growth wise.
That's really good. And knowing that there's always an end to ball, no matter how good you are. And so I love how you said reverse engineering. That's kind of one of my big things. If you can look at where you are and start to pay attention to where you want to be and then work backwards, you stand a chance to land a little bit closer to that goal. And
Yeah.
so once you're in NFL operations, talk about kind of what NFL operations does at large and then some of the roles that you think people aren't aware of.
Okay. Well, integrity of the game is important. Um, as this side of it, as the game operates, it's really about having a consistency and shared responsibility of maintaining that the game is both safe, is enjoyable, is entertaining. It's a game that shows that it's complete fairness throughout, competitive balance, I'd say. Um, and that's just from the competitive standpoint. But obviously, maintaining the health of a player, keeping injury off them. You talk about maybe the fields and the stadiums, the conditions, the uniforms. I look at a lot of that uniform compliance deal. Their stakeholders in terms of partnerships with the NFL. It's big business. So, logos, and different statements that a player might make, different things could affect those partnerships. So from a standpoint of that, it's a lot that we all have to kind of work together to make sure it's a well-oiled machine. Um, the day-to-day or game day things are kind of different. Day-to-day, obviously, there's contracts, there's TV deals that's on the table, there's different apparels and sponsorships and all the partnerships throughout the league. There's the social responsibility, obviously, that continues to ramp up as things progress socially throughout the country and abroad. Growing the game outside of the U.S. and our domestic uh, viewership. We want to try to increase that. I was a participant in NFL Europe, and that was a major thing that stood out in my mind. I was like, I had a great experience over there, overseas playing. I met a lot of people that I otherwise would not have come in contact with. And then I looked at some of the other leagues of what they're doing, how they're growing the game, and it has a global appeal. So that was really one thing I wanted to kind of get my footprint in and be able to kind of help grow the NFL as well. But in terms of what I do, I can't go into great detail, but it has a lot to do with, like I say, just compliance, observations, making notes, making sure that, again, the players' safety is a top priority, making sure that it's a lot of integrity of the game, that people know that this game is played fair, that the game is going to continue to grow and on an upward trajectory to have our youth be a part of it, and help grow the game, because there's so many life lessons that come out of it. Um, Players who play, and I definitely feel like it's the world's greatest game. So many lessons and parables and metaphors that I often speak to, whether I'm, talking to a young person that's dealing with depression, or an older person that's trying to figure out how to stick to things. Like, I draw from the experiences I've had in the game. Being in team atmosphere, you can apply that to, different careers and jobs. Being able to speak, being able to adapt and adjust, showing flexibility, all those things is a lot that happens in game day and NFL operations on a week to week basis throughout the course of the year, and planning and hosting events. Obviously, there's Pro Bowls and there's different camps, and obviously the flag football is really growing and taking off in different pockets of the world. But yeah, just making sure rules are good, and that there's a standard, a very high standard set by the league, and we just want to try to maintain that.
So it sounds like athletes could really do well because of their past background in being team oriented and being good with deadlines and being adaptive in not only project management, but events management and facilities management and
Hmm.
overseeing contracts and procurement and compliance. So there's a whole world on the operations side that athletes can
Yeah.
go into and they can still be in proximity to the game.
Oh yeah, I'm rubbing elbows with a ton of athletes. One of my partners, who actually was one of my heroes growing up, Garrison Hurst. He's a Georgia product. Played running back for UGA and the San Francisco 49ers, and I think I can't recall the other team he played right now. Just being able to bump into guys who were, know your idols and who you looked up to is really rewarding. And you get to really kind of know who they are as a person. We just knew them as players. But they're your dads, your regular dads, regular uncles, brothers, normal individuals that like many of the things that you like. I think a lot of times society will put athletes up on this pedestal, but at the end of the day, they're just regular people, no different from myself than yourself, who deal with a lot of different things. But there's a lot of athletes transitioning into the world because obviously they understand how the game works, and uh, they have green in the game in terms of, or skin in the game in terms of, they want to see the game grow.
Mhm.
They understand how good the game was to them, and they want to continue to help others after them be a part of that game. But it's not just necessarily on the field. I'm loving the diversity that I'm starting to see. We're starting to see more ladies pop up in different roles because their mind, they're brilliant and amazing leaders. There's so many that I think about that have done so many wonderful things over the years, and there's things that I was thinking about that I've seen people initiate. And I'm like, wow, that's good, and they're being led by a lot of women.
Well, James, thank you so much for being on today. Really appreciate how you took us behind the scenes, letting athletes know how they can progress not only in the field, but also in the leagues at large and the careers that are open to them.